Welcome to Backstage Melody. What if one of Fleetwood Mac's most beautiful songs was actually a quiet scream? Sara wasn't just a name, it was a code, a secret Stevie Nicks buried in melody. A love stolen, a friendship destroyed, and a child who never got to live. Behind every note was a heartbreak no one dared talk about. Until now. The storm behind the song. When Fleetwood Mac released Tusk in 1979, fans didn't know what to make of it. It was the strange, sprawling follow-up to Rumours, the album that had catapulted the band into global stardom. Where Rumours was tight and polished, Tusk was chaotic, an experimental double album brimming with tension. But buried in all that noise, something quiet and devastating emerged. A 6-minute, 45-second ballad called Sara. Sara wasn't like anything else on the record. It didn't explode, it drifted, it whispered. And at the center of it was Stevie Nicks, singing a lullaby to someone, or something she never named out loud. It was personal, it was raw, and it was full of shadows. Most listeners didn't understand what they were hearing. Even critics at the time called the song enigmatic and incomplete, but that was the point. Stevie wasn't writing for the charts, she was writing for herself. In her own words, Sara was probably the most honest song I ever wrote. And that honesty wasn't about clarity, it was about feeling. Behind the soft piano chords and layered harmonies was a collapsing world. Fleetwood Mac was unraveling, emotionally, romantically, creatively. The band had become infamous not just for their music, but for their drama. Breakups, betrayals, love affairs tangled like barbed wire. They were sleeping with each other, lying to each other, and recording hits in the middle of it. And that's exactly when Stevie wrote Sara. She would later describe the song as a collage, bits and pieces of her life, stitched together in a haze of heartbreak. There's no single person it's about many. Mick Fleetwood, her unborn child, her former friend, and even herself. Lines like "drowning in the sea of love," where everyone would love to drown, weren't just poetry, they were pain. The studio recording itself was a struggle. The original demo was over 16 minutes long. Stevie had to fight to keep it on the album at all. But she believed in it, not as a hit, but as truth. Because Sara wasn't just another song in Fleetwood Mac's catalog. It was Stevie Nicks bleeding in plain sight, hiding her heartbreak behind metaphors so beautiful. You almost missed the tragedy. And once you knew what to listen for, you couldn't unhear it. Stevie and Mick, the secret affair. By the time Rumours had shattered records and filled stadiums, Fleetwood Mac had also quietly shattered itself. Breakups weren't just lyrics, they were the reality inside every studio session. Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham, once inseparable, were now barely speaking. Christine and John McVie's marriage had ended. The only thing holding the band together was the music, and even that was fraying. In the middle of this emotional wreckage, something even more volatile began. Stevie Nicks started a secret affair with Mick Fleetwood, the band's towering, eccentric drummer. He was married at the time to Jenny Boyd, a former model and the sister of Pattie Boyd, who'd famously been married to both George Harrison and Eric Clapton. Jenny had stood by Mick through years of touring, addiction, and fame, but she had no idea what was coming. Stevie and Mick's romance wasn't supposed to happen. He was the band's backbone. She was reeling from her breakup with Lindsey. But in the chaos of Fleetwood Mac's fame, they found something dangerously comforting in each other. Nights blurred into mornings, parties turned into confessions, and the line between friendship and love disappeared almost overnight. But this wasn't a storybook love. It was messy. It was rushed. It was driven by pain more than passion. Stevie would later admit that it was one of the most emotionally exhausting times of her life. They tried to keep it hidden, even from their bandmates, but secrets don't last long in a band like Fleetwood Mac. Lindsey Buckingham found out, and he didn't take it well. The man who had watched Stevie leave him now had to watch her fall for someone else. Someone he played music with. Every day. The tension between them, already unbearable, turned into silent warfare. Recording sessions became minefields. Glances became daggers. Every harmony they sang together hit a deeper fracture underneath. And Mick? He was spiraling. As his marriage began to fall apart, he doubled down on Stevie. but the emotional weight of juggling a failing band, a crumbling relationship, and a secret romance started to crack him open. He wasn't just cheating on his wife, he was betraying his family, his band, and maybe even himself. In many ways, the affair between Stevie and Mick was doomed from the beginning. Too many broken pieces, too many unsaid things. But for a brief moment, they were each other's escape. The only problem? They weren't escaping to the same place. Their love didn't just collapse quietly, it detonated. And the shrapnel would end up all over Tusk, especially in one song. A song called Sara. Sara, the other woman, and a friend. Just when Stevie thought the heartbreak couldn't cut deeper, it did. After her secret affair with Mick Fleetwood ended in emotional collapse, Stevie expected distance, pain, maybe even silence. What she didn't expect was for Mick to move on, with her best friend. Sara Recor wasn't just some girl from the industry. She was part of Stevie's inner circle, someone she confided in, laughed with, trusted. And now, she was suddenly dating the man who had just left Stevie in emotional shambles. For Stevie, it wasn't just betrayal, it was a double hit. She didn't just lose Mick, she lost a sister. The emotional fallout was immediate. Stevie was devastated. She would later say in the interviews that the loss of Sara as a friend hurt more than the end of her romance with Mick. She married Mick, Stevie said bluntly, and I had to leave. I had to get away. The pain was too sharp, too humiliating to stay close. So, she packed up and left Los Angeles for a while, disappearing from the scene to protect what was left of her heart. It wasn't just about jealousy, it was about trust, loyalty. The emotional whiplash of watching the two people closest to her begin a life together while she was still standing in the wreckage. And here's where the meaning of the song Sara becomes even more haunting. Some fans have long believed Sara was written directly about Sara Recor. The name, the loss, the longing, it all seemed too specific to ignore. And while Stevie never confirmed that every lyric was about Recor, she didn't deny it either. Instead, she said, "There are many Saras in my life, but this one was a real heartbreaker." The lyrics suddenly feel different with this context. Sara, you're the poet in my heart. Never change, never stop. It's not just a love song, it's a farewell letter. A whisper to someone who broke her heart, but whom she still, on some impossible level, loved. The betrayal shaped the song, but the friendship that came before it haunted every word. And that's what made Sara so powerful. It wasn't angry. It was mournful. It was Stevie saying goodbye to a future that was never hers. Not with Mick, not with Sara, not with anyone. Just a song, a name, and a silence that never left. The unborn child and Stevie's deepest loss. For decades, Sara was seen as a cryptic love song, maybe about a friend, maybe about a man. But buried beneath the heartbreak of betrayal and tangled romances was a truth Stevie Nicks didn't speak publicly until much later in life. A truth so private, so painful, it changed the meaning of the song entirely. During her emotionally fraught relationship with Mick Fleetwood, Stevie became pregnant. At the time, Fleetwood Mac was caught in a hurricane of fame, drugs, exhaustion, and emotional chaos. Stevie was touring non-stop, recording endlessly, and battling through heartbreak layered on heartbreak. The idea of bringing a child into that world, into that version of herself, felt not just terrifying, but impossible. She made a decision many women quietly make, but rarely discuss. She chose to end the pregnancy. And that child? She had already picked the name, Sara. At that moment, the name stopped being just a lyric. It became a memorial, a name sung like a prayer, a ghost that lived in every verse. When you build your house, call me home. It isn't just poetic longing, it's the ache of a mother calling to a child she never held. Years later, Stevie revealed this truth in interviews, her voice still shaking with emotion as she spoke about the daughter that never was. Had I married and had that baby, and had she been a girl, I would have named her Sara. That line alone reshaped the entire meaning of the song for fans who had sung it for decades without knowing what or who it was truly for. Suddenly, every lyric dripped with a new kind of pain, a pain you can't dance through or bury in chords. This was a different kind of loss, one that lives quietly but never fades. The trauma of that decision didn't just shape Stevie's art, it followed her. In interviews and memoirs, she's reflected on how fame robbed her of a normal life, of marriage, of motherhood. Sara became the only place she could safely grieve without being judged, questioned, or interrupted. And unlike other songs that fade with time, this one lingered. Because Stevie wasn't just mourning a lost love, she was mourning the version of her life that never got to exist. A family that could have been, a child who should have been, and a future she quietly gave away to protect everything else she'd built. Lindsay's rage and the band's shattered trust. While Stevie was navigating the emotional wreckage of her relationship with Mick and the betrayal by her friend, Sara, someone else in the band was quietly coming undone, Lindsey Buckingham. He wasn't just Stevie's ex, he was her creative partner, her musical equal, and, in many ways, the emotional mirror she had tried to smash but couldn't stop staring into. Their breakup had already left deep scars, many of which were stitched into the grooves of Rumours. But what came next felt like humiliation. Now, not only was Stevie gone, but she was tangled in a romance with his bandmate. And then, as if to twist the knife, she turned that story into a song, one she wanted him to play guitar on. Imagine that, standing in the studio, headphones on, listening to your ex sing about her pain, her loss, and her love for someone else. Someone standing 2 feet away from you. Lindsey was known for being passionate, intense, and meticulous in the studio, but underneath that control, he was simmering with resentment. According to insiders, Lindsey hated Sara when it was first introduced. Not because it was a bad song, it was haunting and beautiful, but because it felt like a betrayal, a song about Mick, a song about pain that wasn't his. And yet, he was being asked to help bring it to life. The emotional landmines in the studio grew more dangerous with each session. Tension between Lindsey and Stevie reached a boiling point. Mick was caught in the middle, and Christine McVie often played the reluctant peacemaker. The chemistry that had once fueled their greatest hits was now corrosive. Every harmony felt like a lie. Every lyric had a target. By the time Tusk was finished, the band was barely functioning. They were exhausted, disconnected, and no longer speaking the same emotional language. And at the center of it all was a song that exposed more than anyone was ready to admit. Sara wasn't just a ballad, it was a spotlight, one that revealed the cracks in the band's foundation, and the emotional wreckage no one wanted to clean up. For Lindsey, it was a reminder that Stevie had moved on, not just from him, but from the version of herself he once loved. And for the rest of the band, it was the sound of trust collapsing under the weight of too many secrets. The song that never left her. Decades passed, relationships faded, albums came and went, and the wounds of Fleetwood Mac's heyday slowly turned into memories. But one thing never changed. Stevie Nicks never stopped performing, Sara. Even when her setlists evolved, even when she went solo, even when the rest of Fleetwood Mac was rotating through breakups, reunions, and retirements, Sara stayed. Why? Because for Stevie, Sara wasn't just a song, it was a ritual, a living memory, a place she returned to again and again, not to relive the pain, but to feel connected to the things she'd lost. In interviews, she's admitted that it's the one song that still makes her emotional when she sings it live. Not because it's sad, but because it's true. Every time she steps onto that stage and the piano begins to hum those familiar chords, she's not just performing, she's revisiting a piece of herself. And the audience can feel it. There's something different when she sings Sara. It's not showy or dramatic. It's quiet, intimate, reverent, like a prayer whispered to someone who's no longer there. And whether fans know the full story or not, they lean in, sensing that something sacred is unfolding. Stevie once said, "Sara was never supposed to be a radio song. I didn't care if it was a hit. I just needed it to exist." That's the difference. Sara wasn't written for the charts. It wasn't crafted for awards or stadium sing-alongs. It was written because she had to write it, because the pain, the love, and the ghosts wouldn't let her go until she put it to paper. Even today, when she speaks about the song, her tone softens. Her voice gets quieter. She once told a crowd, "This is for someone I never met, but think about every day." It was never fully clear whether she meant her unborn child, or the version of herself she lost in the chaos. Maybe both. But that's the magic of Sara. It doesn't just belong to Stevie anymore. It belongs to every listener who's ever lost something they couldn't explain. A person, a dream, a version of themselves they had to bury quietly. And as long as Stevie Nicks has breath in her lungs, she will keep singing Sara, not to move on, but to remember. Sara wasn't just a song, it was a heartbreak. Stevie Nicks never got over, a friend lost, a lover gone, a child she never met. And every time she sings it, she's not just performing, she's remembering. Some songs aren't written for charts, they're written for survival. Subscribe to Backstage Melody for more untold stories behind the music you thought you knew. Because the biggest hits always hide the deepest scars.